Hi, my name is Justin, aka Ghost Reader, and today I'm going to be doing my January wrap up. I read a lot of books in January. I didn't read or finish some, which is a first for me, but won't finish in the future type of thing. But let's jump into it and see how my reads were for the month of January. So the first book that I want to talk about was my fiction read for last month, and that, as you know, I read one fiction, one nonfiction. Um, I strive to, anyway, in any case, read one fiction, one nonfiction, four comic books, um, two short stories, a genre read, a poem by not poem, a play by William Shakespeare, and a quarterly read, and my two yearly reads. So, my fiction read for last month was Without a Country by Aisel Cullen, and I wanted to like this book, but the reading was just kind of the reading it was kind of flat. The writing was flat. It felt like the story, even though it was moving, it didn't feel like it was moving towards something. And it's just, I don't know. I didn't really enjoy it enough to actually push my way through and actually finish it. And this won't be a book I'm going to be going back to. I'm not sure if this was because it's a translated work, translated from Turkish, and the translation didn't really pick up on the nuance of the original author. But yeah, I didn't really like where this book was going at all. It was about a Jewish family that moves from Germany to escape persecution to Turkey, and it's supposed to follow like the family as the family stayed there and then moved on into the present. But I didn't get that far. I was still stuck in the 1940s. So it is what it is. I did end up reading The Magician's Nephew, The Horse and His Boy, and The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe from Lord of the Rings, from the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. I actually never read. I have read before The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, Prince Caspian, Voyage of the Dawn Treader, The Silver Chair, and The Last Battle, but I had never read The Magician's Nephew and The Horse and His Boy. So this time I decided to basically read the whole Chronicles of Narnia in chronological order. So starting with Magician's Nephew, which kind of gives you the backstory to the White Witch and the creation of Narnia. The Horse and His Boy, which I feel is a more direct prequel to The Last Battle, because it kind of gives you some backstory to some actors that appear in The Last Battle. And then, of course, the one that started it all, The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. So really fun to reread those again. It kind of made up for the fact that the fiction read that I had didn't really pan out. I also tried to reread Olaf Stapledon's The Last and First Men, but this book is not a book that can be digested in one straight go like I tried to do. I got about 55% in, and I probably will finish this, but this is something you should take your time and take bites out of because it's really dense. Basically what it is, to be honest, it is basically if someone took their world building notes, put it into book form, and said, here's my book, and here's the history of my world. And that's kind of what it is, because it's telling the history of humanity on Earth from 1930s essentially all the way to like billions of years in the future. And then he describes society as it changes and stuff. So it reads like a work of history, like you're reading a textbook. So it's not easy to get through. I like it for the world building elements, but it's not an easy read to get through. My nonfiction book of January was The Rise and Falls of Dinosaurs by Steve Brussett, and this book was absolutely amazing. I really like this book because it was just absolutely amazing. It gave you a really great rundown of what dinosaurs are, how they came to be, what happened to them, and how the different types of dinosaurs that came, and you actually kind of felt the distance in time, as you kind of with the distances that science says that allows for these dinosaurs to be here and change and adapt. You kind of in a way, this book, at least I had this as an audiobook, you feel the distance in time it is from everything else and from each other. Some of these dinosaurs never actually saw each other because they were just so far apart in time. So this was a great read. I definitely recommend it if you like dinosaurs and want to get into something that's nonfiction but not like history or biography. This is a great nonfiction science book for you to read. Then, of course, I had my comic reads of the month, and I read the Doctor Strange annual. I haven't listened to all the music associated with these yet. I'm going to be continuing to do that into February. But I read the Doctor Strange annual, which basically every year they do like an annual issue, which is kind of like a special. And coming into this, basically Doctor Strange just fought up, had this big battle. He's kind of depowered, and then an old wife of his comes back and wants a divorce. Basically like an official divorce. They've been stopped being together, but she wants like an official magical divorce or something like that. And doesn't she has like this whole thing planned out where basically if he tears up this contract that it'll basically end their marriage, but something else comes up and the contract is used for that instead of dissolving their marriage and the bonds that hold them, because it's not just like we're married, but there's some type of magical bond between them. And you find out that Doctor Strange is kind of an a-hole, and he doesn't want to end it. You find out that he doesn't want to end it because he still kind of needs her as like the power at least that she has as kind of like a tool, because he himself is kind of depowered at the moment. So it was quite an interesting read and look at Doctor Strange. And there's also another short story at the end that I can't really explain because they're so short. It kind of leads into something else that comes later on. So that was an interesting read, Doctor Strange. Then I read Mockingbird, and Mockingbird is a very interesting character, very interesting take on a comic book character. This one was funny for the Easter eggs laid throughout it. I won't say that it was funny. It was okay. I've actually read some of the issues later on in the series. It was a short series, and they were actually pretty good. It got better, I think, as it went along. But some of the things that were happening in the background, it's just more of like I would say more of like this series lent more to like comedy and things like that. So seeing like Tony Stark in like the Shield waiting room and reading like a thing on gonorrhea was actually kind of funny. But the stuff that happens like around her character, as she herself is going to see the doctor and notices strange things going on, it's quite funny. So I enjoyed the funniness in this one. Then Gamora. This is probably my favorite one of the ones I've read. This focuses simply on Gamora's character and goes back to when she's still with Thanos, and Thanos basically, because she's the last of her race, Thanos gives her the chance to actually take revenge on the people who ended her people, and basically she sets out on a journey in this one to basically hunt all of them down, and she realizes there's one left, so she goes to hunt that one down. And I really like the art in this one. Marco Cicchetto, whenever he does artwork on a book, interior art, it's always amazing. So I really enjoyed this book. And then the Guardians of the Galaxy, which was actually quite surprising for me, because the Guardians of the Galaxy in this book aren't the Guardians of the Galaxy that you see in the movie. So they've added, so instead of Peter Quill being Star-Lord, it's actually Kitty Pryde, and they two are engaged. Peter Quill is actually a king of a planet, and Venom, who is actually is also in this, but he is not Eddie Brock. He's basically attached to Flash Thompson, who is like the bully of Peter Parker. That was another change. There was something else too that I can't remember on the top of my head. So it's not the Guardians of the Galaxy that you see in the movies, but still a pretty good opening to this volume of the Guardians of the Galaxy comic book. So that was quite good. And now for my short stories. So my short story reads come from this book, The Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy in 2018. And I read Rivers Run Free by Charles Painter and Destroy the City with Me Tonight by Kate Alice Marshall. And these two short stories were just okay. Rivers Run Free had potential to be absolutely amazing. Basically, you have rivers that are kind of personified as people. So basically, it's like in some, I want to say, dystopian future, they've dammed this river, which was kind of the lifeblood to all these other rivers, and these other rivers are now trying to make it to the sea. So they're personified as people, and trying to make it to the sea. And I really like the concept. I just thought that the ending and the execution of it could have been a bit better, but I really like the concept used here, as like these rivers are trying to make their way to the ocean because they've only heard about it, they've never seen it, and they want to get there to kind of replenish themselves. At least that's the idea. And so I really like the concept. That's the execution could have been a bit better. And Destroy the City with Me Tonight was kind of confusing, but they get something called Casper-Williams syndrome, which, from what I understand, is suddenly, or whatever the syndrome causes, a city to be mapped on your bones, and then people begin to forget you. So no one remembers who you are. They don't remember you. They don't even basically see you. So you're kind of invisible. So in a way, you kind of become one with the city, and you gain like power, so you can't easily die. You run a bit faster. You're kind of stronger and things like that. And the main character has a boyfriend who also catches this syndrome, which unfortunately, in their case, which is those very rare, is sexually transmitted. So boyfriend has it, and he's just completely like, well, I'm just going to destroy the city, and she's kind of trying to stop him, and that's kind of the premise of the story. This one was just an okay story too. I really thought it could have been better, but it was just okay. So hopefully, like I said, I really like the concept of Rivers Run Free. And Destroyed City to meet with me tonight wasn't bad, but it wasn't great in my opinion. So hopefully, the other two stories I read this month have great concepts and are also really great reads. So then the Shakespeare play that I read was Julius Caesar, and Julius Caesar by William Shakespeare was actually really good. I liked it. Not my favorite Shakespeare play. I think that one will have to still be either Titus Andronicus or Coriolanus, but it was still a good read. It's a tragedy in the fact that the main character, so like Brutus, I'm going to say, feels that what he's doing is for the good of Rome, and that he is doing the right thing. And in fact, you can argue that he is doing the right thing, and that him being such a quote unquote good person actually ends up screwing him up in the end. When in fact, if he had actually taken care of Mark Antony and kept him, basically killed him or imprisoned him or kept him from speaking to the Roman crowd, it's quite possible that the Roman Republic could have been saved and not have been, sent down the way that it went to and becoming ruled by emperors. So this was a quite interesting play. I really liked it. I liked the idea of having this character that's really upright and just, and perhaps under the right circumstances would be seen that way, but of course he is seen merely as a traitor by killing Julius Caesar. So that was actually a really decent play to read. And so my genre read of the month, which is in YA or new adult fiction, was The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, and I actually really liked this book. I didn't think that I would like it as much as I did. I enjoyed reading it. Basically, it's about this girl Jude who basically is taken to the land of the Fae. She's human, but she is actually half human and half Fae. Her father's Fae. Basically has a traumatic experience being introduced to her father, is taken to the land of Fae, and she's trying to kind of find her way in this world, and while also trying to basically stay alive, because the Fae people, or at least her peers, don't really like her at all. And so it goes from being like this kind of like, high school bullying to like basically having huge momentous consequences for the kingdom of the Fae. So this was actually like a really interesting book. I liked it. The sequel for it just dropped, The Wicked King, I believe. But I'm not going to be picking that up anytime soon. Maybe later in the year, but not at this time. But I did enjoy The Cruel Prince, and at some point I will be reading The Wicked King. I'm just not sure when. And then the book that I read is War for Armageddon from the Warhammer 40,000 series. This is a sci-fi book, a sci-fi universe that I actually have come to really like after watching a couple lore videos about Warhammer 40,000 on YouTube. It's basically a tabletop game that became popular enough to spawn like video games and books about it, and I really like the lore. Wouldn't want to live in this universe because it's absolutely terrible, but I really am drawn in by the lore of it. And so basically I'm reading this at my leisure. I really don't have any time limit or anything. When I get some time, I read 10 or 5 pages here and there. And so this is actually an omnibus, so it contains, I think, 2 novels and a couple of short stories. So it's quite a bargain. I'm really enjoying the story so far. Basically, humanity on this one world called Armageddon is trying to defend this city called Hell's Reach from these basically orcs who are basically invading them by the millions. It's a very dark, war-torn story And I'm really liking it so far. So I'm going to be continuing this at my leisure. Maybe I'll read some of it, maybe I won't. So far, I am, I think, 130 pages in. So I read 130 pages of this in January. No, actually, I read 110 pages of this in January. 20 pages of this month. So yeah, I will be continuing this month. I also will be continuing The First Man in Rome. I read the first 65 pages, and so far, it's just been introducing the main characters: Sulla, Marius, Jugurtha, Julius Caesar's family. So not much has really happened yet in the first 65 pages, but it is setting up the scene, and it's done a very good job of doing that. And if you are a fan of Rome, those names I mentioned, you probably are like really excited now. But yeah, so I can't wait to see where this book goes, and to see like how far it gets into the relationship between all the characters that is introduced so far. I also have read in my yearly read the English and Their History. I read about 38 pages of this, including the introduction last month. And so, yeah, just getting into the beginnings of what comes to be known as England, and how the people got there, who makes up the people that eventually come to be called the English. And so that's where I am now in this book, and how basically a lot of it is kind of, we don't really know, but we kind of have some archaeological evidence and some stories from them that kind of gives an idea of what happened, who came there, from where, to make up the people who eventually come to be known as the English. And then a book that I read because Old Chapter Blue and Verse, I'm pretty sure that's the name of this channel, is doing a series on morality. So every month he's going to be reading, or almost every month, he's going to be reading a book about morality, and a movie about morality, and discussing the book and the movie. And this, I'm not going to be watching the movies, but I will be reading the books when I can. And this month of January, the book was This Republic of Suffering, Death and the Civil War by Drew Gilpin Faust. And so I will actually be making a separate video about my thoughts on this book, so I won't discuss it here, but I will say it was actually a really good book. And last but not least, I read about 9% of Edward Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. It basically follows the start of the empire, going from republic to empire, all the way up to Gallienus so far. That's the Emperor Gallienus, so around 253 BC, not BC, AD. So we're starting to get into the third crisis of the crisis of the 3rd century, where things started to go wrong for the Roman Empire. So it's been really interesting. It's covering a lot of ground I already know from listening to the podcast, The History of Rome, but still, I'm learning some stuff. Introduced so far the Gauls, the Germans, and the people in the East, like the Persians, who are going to eventually be putting pressure on the Romans, and that pressure is going to start to see Rome crack and begin its fall. So that's what I read in the month of January. Hope you guys all had a good reading month. Tell me, what was your favorite book of the month of January? I think my favorite read for the month of January was The Rise and Fall of Dinosaurs, and second will probably have to be The Cruel Prince. So if you like this video, please hit the like button. If you want to see more videos from me, please subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at GhostReach28, and also on Goodreads. The link to that is down in the description box below. So as always, keep reading.